ready with the slides?
Yes. Should I start sharing screen?
Sure. You can start the session now as well. Enjoy.
Okay, let me just introduce you. So thanks everyone for attending the second session of the third day of the second session of the third day of PCC 2020. We have with us a paper on topology hiding communication from minimal assumptions. It's by Marshall Ball, Alette Boyle, Ron Cohen, Lisa Cole, Tal Malkin, Pierre Mayer, and Tal Moran. And the speaker is Pierre. Go ahead, Pierre.
Okay, so thank you for your introduction. Well, as much as I'd like to believe that...
Excuse me, may I interrupt? Yeah. You have an outline on your screen. Maybe you want to hide the video controls. Or...
Okay, so... Okay, sorry, let me just try... Sorry. So if I stop sharing and start again, will it be better? How's this?
It's still there. It's in the upper left corner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just try that.
All right. Is this... All right, good. Yeah, sorry for that. So again, thank you for your introduction. And okay, so as much as I'd like to believe that this is a mainstream topic, I guess it would be a good idea to start by defining topology hiding computation, or THC. Now, in short, it's a form of secure multi-party computation over incomplete networks, where we want to keep the structure or topology of the network private. Now, private means that initially, each party only gets their local view of the network, and by the end of the computation, they should have learned nothing more about the graph. And formally, learning nothing more about the graph means that if you have a protocol designed for a specific graph class G, it should be able to simulate the adversary's view of the protocol, given only the graph class and the local view of the corrupt nodes. Now, this ensures that the parties at the end will only ever get their local view of the graph. And if we look at the literature, there have been many works focusing on using strong tools, such as public key cryptography, in order to achieve the notion of topology hiding computation in the presence of strong adversaries. Whereas in contrast, we investigate the bare minimalistic setting in order to understand the core difficulty behind hiding the topology. So this means that we only consider broadcast, hence the title Topology Hiding Communication. And we only tolerate adversaries who, despite their very best efforts, will only be able to perform a single semi-honest corruption. So, almost not adversarial. Right, so these are the functionalities: one topology hiding broadcast and one topology hiding anonymous broadcast. Now, you may be wondering if you just didn't stumble by accident into some rump session talk, because it does sound a bit trivial when I present it this way. So I'll reassure you that as soon as you introduce the notion of topology hiding, even this setting becomes very interesting. And in fact, the question we propose to answer in this paper is the following. You give me a graph class, and I'll tell you what tools you need to perform topology hiding broadcast and anonymous broadcast. Now, this is a neat question to be sure, but can we hope to get a clean answer, or will we need a zoo of 100,000 different assumptions, one for each graph class, which would also be fun, but fortunately that's not the case. In fact, we show that there are only 3 possible assumptions required: information theoretic, so unconditional, equivalent to key agreement, or equivalent to OT. And now let's have a more in-depth look at our results, and starting with broadcast. So the way to read this is that the assumption key agreement is both necessary and sufficient if you want to do broadcast on the class of all graphs. Now, the first point of interest is that you have a very neat separation between what's possible information theoretically and what requires key agreement. So that's the purely graph theoretic concept of two connectivity of every graph in the class. So already pretty nice. And also, if you were to compare this with previous works, we now have really minimal assumptions in the sense that they are both necessary and sufficient, whereas we only had very partial results before. Now, if we consider anonymous broadcast 2, we still have this nice barrier of 2 connectivity, but we have an additional one, that of honest majority between between classes which have key agreement as a minimal assumption and those who have OT. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the lower bounds actually we have actually more interesting than simply what was presented in the previous slide. In fact, that what makes topology hiding anonymous broadcast on all graphs hard, in the sense that it requires OT, is not the fact that you have all graphs, but there's a very small kernel of a hard problem, and that's already performing anonymous broadcast on this very small graph class already implies OT. So now that we went over an abstract overview of the results, if you will, I want to leave you, I want you to all leave here having had a glimpse at a concrete topology hiding problem. So let's say you have Alice, Bob, and Charlie in one of these 3 configurations, and Alice wants to broadcast to the same message to both Bob and Charlie. Now, the only thing to hide from a topology hiding perspective is we don't want Bob to know if Charlie is communicating with Alice or not. And similarly, or symmetrically, we don't want Charlie to know when Bob is talking to Alice. So there's absolutely no message privacy in here at all. It's all about hiding the topology. And so, well, hopefully you're intrigued and you'll have a look at our paper, which says you need key agreement if you want to solve this very simple problem of simply Alice wants to send messages to Bob and Charlie. So, and on that note, I'd like to thank you all for listening. I wish you have a good morning, evening, or like whatever time zone you're in. And I hope you enjoy reading our paper. Thank you very much. Right.
Good. Thank you, Pierre. Any questions on chat or Zoom? While people are thinking,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So the key agreement is bipartite key agreement sufficient, or do you need, like, for this triangle case, you need tripartite key agreement?
No, it's simply a 2-party key agreement.
So basically, Diffie-Hellman is sufficient.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about the case of more than one corruption. So would you still have information theoretic security, say, for K connectivity with 2 corruptions, or does the whole landscape change? It's totally different.
So what we do know, so one half of the question still holds. Like, it's known that if you had T corruptions, and you do not have T+1 connectivity, you'll at least need key agreement.
Okay.
But that's already for incomplete networks. This has nothing to do with hiding the topology. And unfortunately, we have no feasibility results against more than one corruption. Information theoretic ones, I mean. But it's conjectured to hold.
Okay, so thank you. And if we have no more questions, we'll move to the next talk. Tianren, can you set up?
Could you hear?
Okay, so our next talk is on information theoretic 2-round MPC without round collapsing, adaptive security, and more. Oh, sounds promising. By Rachel Lin, Tianren Liu, and Ho-Tek Wei. Go ahead.
Thanks for introducing our work. We internally call this work simple 2-round MPC. So we all know MPC. MPC has many different settings. In this work, we consider semi-honest adversary, adaptive corruption, information circle security. The function can be arithmetic and we only need black box field access. We construct the MPC in two different models. One in the plain model, assuming honest majority, the other in a correlated randomness model, tolerating any number of corruptions. So the round complexity of semi-honest MPC has been extensively studied, and here's an incomplete list. Our work is mostly related to the recent work by Applebaum et al. And the earlier work by Ishii-Kushilevitz. Previous two round MPC use a technique called round collapsing. It starts with a constant round MPC. The rounds can be collapsed by first write down the whole MPC as a Boolean circuit, then garbled it, then somehow compute the garbling circuit by two rounds the MPC. As you can see, it's complicated and not very efficient. In the contrast, we directly construct information circle two-round MPC without round collapsing. One tolerates less than half corruption in the plain model, the other tolerates any number of corruption in the OLE correlation model, which is an arithmetic analog of OT correlation. Our key contribution here is simplicity. And besides simplicity, we also achieve adaptive security with explicit simulator, support arithmetic functions, be more efficient, and there's a standard extension to p-poly. Okay. The key building block here is called multi-party randomized encoding, introduced by ABT18. It consists of an encoder and a decoder. The encoder takes parties' inputs and private randomness and output an encoding. Then the decoder maps the encoding to the function output. It is correct if it's always matched function output. For privacy, the encoding can be simulated by the function output. So far, it's the definition of randomized encoding. For multi-party randomized encoding, the local randomness can also be simulated. Give the simulator some private input, it can also simulate the local randomness of the corresponding parties. We want two-round MPC, so we hope the encoder has degree 2. Unfortunately, Ishii-Kushilevitz proved that the degree of the encoder has to be at least 3. But this is not the end. Applebaum, Barsky, and Sabari came and said, look, divide the encoder into local parts and a global part. Then there exists MPRE such that the global part has degree 2. Once you construct such degree 2 MPRE, you are almost done. Combine such degree 2 MPRE with a degree 2 MPC computing degree 2 polynomial gives what we want. So now come to our result. In the honest majority setting, we construct a degree 2 MPRE that tolerates half-band corruption, combine it with a two-round MPC computing degree 2 polynomial, which we know is BJW, gives a two-round MPC. Similarly, in the honest minority setting. So in the last 2 minutes, I will briefly show how simple our MPRE is. Thanks to Ishii and Kushilevitz, it's sufficient to just consider this complete function. 3-party hold x, y, z respectively. The function output x times y times z plus some linear term. Let them sample random polynomial PQ as the Shamir sharing of x and y. Shamir told us that it's safe to let the S party knows PIQI. So imagine that magically the S party gets PIQI. Then he can locally compute PI times QI. By the standard analysis, XY can be linearly recovered from these products. So the function output can be computed by the following formula, which is a degree 2 function after locally multiply PIQI. This looks like a degree 2 MPRE, but of course, parties won't magically get PIQI. How to get around this issue? We can compute each monomial in this formula separately. So here it's a new complete function. PI, QI, and Z are held by different parties. We are making some progress because the S party can now get the leakage PI, QI. More formally, It means if the ice party is corrupted, we will give the adversary PIQI for free. Now I'm ready to present our final construction. Write down the new complete function as the determinant of this matrix. Then multiply random matrix on both sides. This is the standard IK randomized encoding. Expand the encoding matrix, and this is going to be the MPRE, except for two questions. The first questions, look into the matrix. There's a degree 3 terms, but we want degree 2 MPRE. How should we handle it? And the second question, MPRE only have local randomness. So who should sample this random R1 up to R5 in the random matrix? The right answer to the second question is to let the S party sample R1, R5 by himself. Why is this safe? Observe that in the encoding, R1, R5 are used to one-time pad P1, Q1. And we knew P1, Q1 can be leaked to the ice party. So it's fine to let him sample R1, R5. This is informal, but can be formalized. Now back to the first question. Since the ice party samples R1, R5, he can locally multiply R1, R5. After this local multiplication, the only degree 3 term become degree 2 effectively. So we are done. So putting things together, this is going to be our MPRE. PQ are sampled by the party holding XY. The ice party samples R1, R5, and locally multiply them to reduce the degree. The rest of the randomness can be jointly sampled. And finally, compute this degree 2 MPRE by BTW gives you 2-round MPC. That's it. All in one slide. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tianwen. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Hi, Tianwen. In your first slide, one of the first slides where you showed your results, I don't remember what it was, but a bunch of them had asterisks next to them. And I was going to ask what they meant, and now I forgot what they were. But...
Okay. So, okay.
Yes, this one.
Okay, so it means previous work by Gardishak and Srinivasa, they already claim adaptive security, but they didn't give a proof. They just say it's information theoretical, so it's adaptive security.
Yeah,
Asterisk is just about the novelty, not about what you actually achieve.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I also think that ABT is secure, by the way. It's adaptively secure. We didn't bother to look at it because in the passive set, adaptive security is kind of weird. But I think
I believe that they should be adaptive secure, but their construction are more complicated, so it's hard to explicitly prove it. Yeah.
Did you try?
They didn't do it in their paper. I don't know whether.
No. I'm talking about our paper, about ABT. I mean, we didn't try. I'm pretty sure that it's fairly easy to prove adaptive security there. Do you see an obstacle?
I doubt. I don't think there should be. I don't. Yeah. I think the previous work should be explicit. Adaptive secure. They just didn't show it. Yeah. Sorry, you just didn't show it in the paper. Yeah, as I mentioned, the main contribution here is simplicity. Yeah, the others are more like side products.
Other questions? So I have one question. It's not really appropriate for TCC. It's kind of dirty, but maybe you'll answer it. Do you have any indication of how efficient in terms of communication the 2-round protocol will be?
Okay, good question. Thank you. Yeah, so for this complete functionality, let's see. For this complete functionality,
I'll always try my best to help.
It caused constant communication between each pair of parties. So it's n squared in total. And for general NC1, it's n squared times the total communication. It's n squared times the length of AIK randomized encoding. So it's the per pair of party, it's the length of AIK randomized encoding.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, for our next talk, the next talk is Towards Multi-Party Computation Withstanding Coercion of All Parties by Ron Conetti and Oksana. And Oksana will speak.
Thanks, Niv. All right. So let me first introduce what Incursible MPC is. So it's a multi-party computation, which comes with a standard correctness guarantee. But in addition, there is a stronger security requirement, which is called incursibility, which basically says that parties can lie about their inputs and outputs in the protocol. So more concretely, the adversary can first listen to the communication in the protocol, and then it can approach any party or even all parties and demand to know their full internal state in this protocol. This includes the inputs, the outputs, and the randomness of the computation. And Incursible MPC should come with a special faking algorithm, which allows parties to produce fake randomness consistent with the transcript of the protocol and any fake inputs and outputs of their choice. So this security requirement is pretty strong. In particular, it implies adaptive security. So in this paper, we look at two main settings. One we call cooperative incursibility, and roughly it says that all parties either jointly lie or jointly tell the truth at the same time. And we call it cooperative because intuitively this means that parties have the same interests. They all want to hide what has happened, and they want to protect themselves against an external attacker. We also look at a stronger notion called full incursibility, which also captures scenarios where one party may act against the other party. Okay, a word on the prior work. So in this work, we focus on what's called a semi-honest coercion, and this is usually called receipt freeness in voting literature, which basically says that parties follow the protocol honestly, and the adversary only coerces at the very end. In this setting, we have only a few works. So we have the work of Canetti Gennaro, which showed MPC withstanding coercion of up to half participants. And there are two additional works which were actually designed with a different goal in mind, but they also withstand coercion of a single party. And let me also mention some works on deniable encryption, which is a special case of Incursible MPC for message transmission functionality. And so naturally, in this work, we ask, can we achieve incursibility for all parties simultaneously? And let me also mention that there are works on active coercion and a lot of works on voting, but all those works basically make use of some inaccessibility assumption, such as voting booth or hardware token and so on. This means that part of the computation is not visible even to parties themselves. And in this work, we don't make such an assumption. All right, so here are our results. So first we show how to convert deniable encryption with certain properties into a fully incursible oblivious transfer. And this immediately gives you fully incursible 2PC, but only for short inputs. Now we know that standard non-incursible OT implies standard MPC via GMW, for example, but this transformation seems to fail in incursible scenario. So in order to get MPC, we show a different transformation, which takes any deniable encryption and adaptive MPC with some properties and achieve incursible MPC. And the downside is that this MPC is only cooperatively incursible. It's not fully incursible. And our third result is a lower bound, which shows that protocols with some communication patterns cannot be incursible. And so the natural open problems are first, can we get fully incursible MPC? And second question is about round complexity. So our MPC takes 4 rounds, and 2 rounds are provably impossible. So can you build it in 3 rounds, even if it's just cooperatively incursible MPC? Okay, and let me really briefly tell you how the OT works, because it's a really simple construction. So the idea is that the sender should transmit both inputs via 2 instances of deniable encryption, but the receiver will participate in one of the instances obliviously, meaning that it won't have the receiver randomness, which will allow it to decrypt. So this way it can only decrypt from the execution corresponding to its input bit B. And to lie about their inputs, the sender directly uses sender deniability of encryption, and the receiver, to lie about its inputs, need to lie about which execution was oblivious and which was normal. So it's pretty easy to claim that the normal execution was oblivious. Just pretend you never generated any randomness there. It's a little harder to claim that oblivious execution was normal because now you have to show some randomness for the normal execution. And it's actually pretty easy to achieve that as well because the receiver can simply use the receiver faking algorithm of underlying deniable encryption. One issue though is that normally receiver faking algorithm would need to know the true randomness of the receiver in the protocol, which the receiver doesn't have because that execution was oblivious. And that's why we need the special properties from deniable encryption. So this property, when the true randomness is not required to fake, is called public receiver deniability. And another property would be obliviousness. And we do have a construction which satisfies both properties. And let me skip that. And so this is the overview of our results and open problems. Thank you very much for attention. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So thank you. Any questions? Chat or speak up or slip. So there's a question here. Is 4-round needed because you use adaptive MPC?
So we don't know if it's needed, but in our construction, we take a 4-round MPC and compile it with deniable encryption by encrypting every round and doing something else. And as a result, we get 3 rounds and 3 rounds like this, and the total would be 4 rounds. But we don't know if this is inherent.
Pratik, do you simply want to speak up?
Hey, hi, Oksana. Pratik here.
Hey.
Yeah, so suppose the receiver started off with bit equals to 0, and he was coerced and he wants to open to bit equals to 1. So does he know M1 when he is required to open his view? Because his view will contain M1, right? Instead of M0.
Yeah, he doesn't know the other bit of the sender, and he shouldn't, because that would violate the privacy. So when receiver is faking, it needs to basically it needs to know the fake input and the fake output somehow from live. Okay, so in the model, this fake output would be specified by the environment. And the requirements, security requirement says that as long as that fake output would be consistent with the messages of the sender, the total execution of the protocol should look like it's an honest one. And if it's not consistent, you should still get the best possible security.
Okay, okay, thanks.
So I have another question if there's no other questions. Hi, Oksana. Is there a difference in the feasibility landscape when you restrict the number of corruptions to n/2 versus n-1 versus all n corruptions? Do things change very significantly? For example, is the 2-round protocol, does it become possible if you have only n-1 corruptions?
Yeah, so the 2-round protocol would still be impossible for anything which implies a bit transmission, because there is an impossibility result for deniable encryption for the receiver only, even.
Okay, okay.
But our impossibility, it only talks about several corruptions, excursions actually. So it's also does not require all parties to be fully cursed.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions here or on chat? Okay, maybe we can move on then. Benny, are you? Yeah, it looks like Benny is giving the.
Okay, so I'm not going to give the talk. Peter preferred it, but she couldn't make it, so there's a video. So I try.
Okay.
Yes, so I'll try to put the video on. Let me see if I can do it. Do you see it?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, let's hear Peter.
Hi everyone, my name is Arpita, and in this talk I'm going to present a joint work with Benny and Elron entitled The Resiliency of MPC with Low Interaction, the Benefit of Making Errors. In this work, we study the round complexity of MPC in the classical setting of BGW and CCD88. That is, we assume secure and authenticated point-to-point and broadcast channel model. Our adversary is computationally unbounded, active, and rational, and we obtain information theoretic security with guaranteed output delivery. A bit of history touching upon the milestones. BGW88, CCD88, and RB89 proved landmark feasibility results for perfect and statistical MPC protocols, yet with depth-dependent round complexity. Next, Kushai and Kusilovich construct constant-round protocols, yet they are non-optimal and are efficient only for log-space computations. Recently, ABT19 and AKP20 construct perfect protocols that are round optimal and are efficient for log-space computations. These work leave open a very interesting open question: can we do better in terms of round complexity by relaxing to statistical security? In this work, we answer this question in affirmative, and that is the starting point of our work. GIKR02 shows that fairness, let alone full security, is impossible in 2 rounds with more than one correction. Next, AKP20 shows that perfect full security in 3 rounds is impossible with less than 1/3 correction. These lower bounds are complemented with perfect upper bound results that are tied in ABT19 and AKP20. In this work, we show that best of these 2 protocols can be achieved, that is a round complexity of 3 and a resiliency of 1/3 if we are happy to make errors. The round complexity of our protocol cannot be improved further because of GIKR02 lower bound, and the resiliency cannot be improved because in this work we show that with more than 1/3 corruption, statistical full security in 3 rounds is impossible. Unfortunately, our construction requires exponential in computation. Downgrading the security to cryptographic security, we present an efficient protocol for all functions, not just log-space functions. Our protocol relies on non-interactive commitment schemes, and when we use statistical non-interactive commitment schemes in the presence of CRS, we obtain everlasting security. Our protocol is to be compared with existing protocols that use public key. Our next contribution is about coming up with a new model of computation. A direct implication of GIKR02 is that no 2-round fully secure protocol in plain model can tolerate linear resiliency. In this work, we come up with a new natural and meaningful 2-round model that would allow protocols with linear resiliency. We call this model as single input first round or CFR model. Here, the parties are allowed to communicate to each other over point-to-point and broadcast channel. And apart from that, only in the first round, individual parties are allowed to make ideal calls to single input function. And by single input function, I mean that the output of such a function would depend on the input of a single party. And such functions abstract authenticated private communication, broadcast communication, as well as interestingly polynomial VSS functionalities, which is what we use for our upper bounds. In a CFR protocol, the first round messages depend on individual parties' inputs, and the second round is used for mixing, and therefore for computing any non-trivial function, 2 rounds are indeed necessary. In CFR setting, we prove a very interesting impossibility result that perfect MPC is impossible with more than 1/4 corruption. However, we show that this impossibility can be circumvented if we are happy to make errors. That is, we can construct a CFR protocol with less than 1/3 corruption. This protocol is an FVSS hybrid model. And when we plug in with a 2-round VSS, which is also a contribution from this work, we obtain a 3-round statistical VSS with less than 1/3 corruption. I would like to draw your attention to a very interesting implication of our impossibility in the case of perfect security with less than 1/3 corruption. So our results show that R plus 1 round MPC cannot be derived from R round VSS in a black box way. Indeed, AKP20 recently constructed a 4-round MPC protocol from a 3-round VSS protocol, exploiting the feature of the 3-round VSS protocol. Our impossibility shows that this complication is inherent. In the last part, we construct VSS protocols in 2 rounds budget. I would like to mention that our VSS functionality is tailored for polynomial-based VSS protocols. Here, GIKR01 shows that 1-round perfect VSS is impossible with more than 1 corruption, and 2-round perfect VSS is impossible with more than 1/3 corruption. These results are complemented with perfect round optimal protocols. In this work, we saw that best of these 2 protocols can be achieved, that is a round complexity of 2 and a resiliency of 1/3 if we are happy to make errors. The round complexity cannot be improved due to GIKR01 result, and the resiliency cannot be improved because in this work we proved that that is impossible. In summary, our takeaway message is it's good to make errors if we want less interaction and we like modularity. At the heart of our construction lies a new 3-party MPC abstraction, which we call as secure computation with a guard, which has 1 round implementation in the correlated randomness model. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so I guess that I can take answers now. Questions, sorry. Let me stop sharing. How do I do this?
There should be something blinking at the top of your screen, maybe.
Ah, good. Stop share. Okay.
So any questions? Okay, I can ask a question while others are thinking about theirs. So towards the end of the talk, she mentioned secure computation with guard. I was just curious to learn more about what this is.
Excellent question. So let me share again. Okay, so in one slide, I think that this is a cool concept. One slide, but I cannot find it. One slide. Okay. So it's a 3-party problem where you want to compute. So you have Alice, Bob, and Carol, and you want to deliver the value of a function to Carol. And the point is that both inputs are held by Alice, but one of these inputs is also duplicated in the Bob holds it, the B part. And what you want to do is you want to pass this information to Carol, and you want on one hand to keep B secret. On the other hand, you want to make sure that Alice will not be able to change B. So think of Bob as a guard. That's where the name comes from. Bob kinds of guard the computation so that Alice will not be able to change the B thing. So it turns out that this 3-party problem can be solved statistically in just 1 round, assuming that you have a single offline round. And the more interesting, and this is based on private simultaneous message protocols and message authentication codes. And I think that what's more interesting is that you can actually use this thing as a building block to shave rounds in other protocols. So this is actually a very useful tool. For example, I will not explain how, but think about the setting where you already shared some secrets. So you have, say, Shamir secrets all around, and you want to apply some homomorphic operation over them, even let's say addition. So normally, if I want to do some addition to take some linear combination of the shares, I have to publish the linear operation. This is a round, and now everyone will have to, to apply this linear operation locally and broadcast the result. So this is 2 rounds. And it turns out that by using this kind of thing, I can compress these 2 rounds into a single round. Okay, so I can announce and get the results in a single round, assuming that the person who actually chooses the A part will choose the linear combination, already know all the shares. Okay, and this kind of weird situation arises when you try to build protocols and like in 2nd level sharing and so on. And this is part of what gives us the advantage.
Thank you for the detailed explanation.
Maybe
No, that's great. I wanted to hear more, but I shouldn't talk all the time. So any other questions? Yeah, so there's a question in the chat from Manoj. What is the communication complexity like?
When I see that Shai asked me to increase the volume. Okay, probably that was, now you can hear me well. Probably it was Peter's volume. Okay. Communication complexity. So, okay, so all these results, the positive results apply to general functions. Now, what we do, we use this theorem that started with ABT. We heard about it and was later involved into a malicious setting and so on, which reduces a general computation to a degree 2 computation. Okay, so you lose a lot in this reduction when you move to this completeness theorem, like many other completeness theorems, they have large blow up. So there you will lose a lot. You know, it's at least quadratic in the say branching program size. But if you focus on degree 2 functionalities, then the overhead is not that large and things are quite efficient. We didn't try to fully optimize them. I should also say, Peter said that, mentioned that the computational complexity is exponential in the number of parties. This is due to the fact that in our VSS protocol, the new VSS protocol, we kind of run a click finding algorithm. So this is terrible, and this is exponential time in n, but the communication complexity is actually polynomial. So this is just this exponential blow up happens only on the computation and not in the communication. And it would be great to reduce also the computation to polynomial. We don't know whether it's possible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so maybe we should move on to the next speaker. Dana, are you here? Hi.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, maybe, yeah.
Okay, can you hear and see?
Yes.
Actually, it's hard to hear. I think
hard
you
to
should
hear?
Yeah.
Is that better or?
Much better.
This is much better.
I just hold it, hold it up. Okay, should I just start?
Our next,
okay.
Oh yeah, let me just, our next speaker is Dana Datman-Soled. She'll talk about revisiting fairness in MPC, polynomial number of parties, and general adversarial structures.
Okay, thank you very much, Dakshita, and thank you everyone for attending. So I think fairness was touched upon in the previous talk, but let me just mention again what fairness is. So informally, when we talk about fairness and multi-party computation, we want to prevent a subset of malicious parties from aborting the protocol early, getting the output of the functionality, and preventing the honest parties from learning the output. And if we look at this in terms of the ideal real formalization, what this means is that in the ideal model, we have two phases of the protocol. In the first phase, all the parties send their inputs to the ideal functionality. At this point, it could still be possible to cause an abort and nobody would receive their output. But in the second phase, all the parties receive the output simultaneously. And so no party can receive its output while preventing another party from receiving the output. So let me talk just briefly about some basic impossibility results, as well as some generic information theoretic positive results. So it's well known that without an honest majority, some functions cannot be computed fairly. So in the classical work of Cleve from back in '86, he showed that fair coin tossing is impossible when n out of 2, so n over 2, so half out of n parties are fail stop, which means that they behave honestly, but may abort the protocol early.
They would like to compute a function f of a, comma b.
Oh,
Alice holds both
sorry,
a and
I don't know what that is.
Bob's holds.
Yeah, let me check.
Okay.
Oh, I can't hear. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And prior work has also considered a more general case of general adversarial structures. So what is an adversarial structure? So for those of you who maybe have not seen this before, so an adversarial structure A is a set of sets, and we will allow the adversary to corrupt any set S of parties such that S is contained in A, adversarial structure. And prior work also defined this set of adversarial structures, Q2, and this consists of adversarial structures A, for which no two sets in A cover the entire set of parties N. So you can think of Q2 as the analog of honest majority in the case of general adversarial structures. And I guess from this viewpoint, perhaps not that surprisingly, although the construction is very nice and clever, Hurt and Maurer presented an inefficient information theoretic secure protocol for fail-stop adversaries for adversarial structures in Q2. And on the flip side, they also show that it is impossible to achieve even computational security with fairness for all functionalities for adversarial structures that are not in Q2. So what is there left to do? So our focus is going to be on fairly computing specific functionalities F. So we don't have hope to compute every functionality F, but we can still ask about whether we can compute specific functionalities F without honest majority, or more generally with adversarial structures that are outside of the set Q2. So probably people are more familiar with the two-party setting. So here there is more that is known. So in a breakthrough result, it was first shown that non-trivial functions can be computed fairly even without honest majority by Gordon et al. And since that work, there has been some subsequent or quite a bit of subsequent work. And ultimately, we now have a full characterization of the necessary and sufficient conditions for fair computation of large classes of functionalities by combining works of Asherov as well as a subsequent work of Asherov et al. However, in the multi-party setting, far less is known. So prior to our work, what was known? It was known how to compute the and or functionalities with any polynomial number of parties and up to n-1 corruptions. It was known how to compute the majority function with 3 parties and up to 2 corruptions. And there was also a more generic transformation that took functionality F such that every n/2 partition of the inputs can be computed fairly and efficiently in the two-party setting, and showed how to transform this into a multi-party protocol tolerating up to n/2 corruptions. However, this transformation is exponential in the number of parties, and so it only scales up to a logarithmic number of parties, where n is logarithmic in the security parameter. So given this state, the high-level question that motivated this work, and I believe it's an interesting open question for future work, is to characterize the pairs AF for which we can obtain fair protocols, where A is an n-party adversarial structure which is not contained in Q2, and F is an n-party functionality. And so we give some partial answers in this work, but I think that this question is still wide open, and I hope that other people will look at this problem, as I think there's a lot left to do here. So finally, let me talk about our results. So we have 2 main results. So the first result is for symmetric functionalities F. So f is an n input Boolean function. We assume that each party holds 1 bit. And symmetric means that the output of the functionality depends only on the number of ones in the input. So we can also represent f in terms of a 2-input functionality, little f, where the first input of little f is the sum of the first half of the inputs, and the second input is the sum of the second half of the inputs. And assuming that we have an efficient protocol computing little f fairly in the 2-party setting, then for any polynomial number of parties, there is an efficient protocol for computing f fairly in the n-party setting with up to n/2 corruptions. And the second result says that it pertains only to the majority function, and it says that there is an efficient protocol for computing n-party majority fairly for any n equals polynomial number of parties with up to n/2 + 1 corruptions. So we do slightly better. The first result is for n/2 corruption. The second result is for n/2 + 1. And we also have some extensions. So the second result can be extended to tolerate up to n/2 + c corruptions for constant c. And both results have analogs and can be extended to the case of more general, possibly non-threshold adversarial structures. So let me just talk briefly about the main idea for the first result. So first of all, we are going to consider the simplified model of the dealer model. So in this case, we have a trusted party called the dealer who outputs shares for all of the parties and distributes them. And what the dealer will do is it will first obtain all the inputs from all the parties, and it's going to compute the sum of these inputs. And now, since we have this nice property that the function is symmetric, we can actually afford to run a fair protocol. The dealer will run a fair protocol for little f for every possible pair of inputs. So there aren't that many possible pair of inputs. So we'll run this protocol kind of in the head for every possible pair of inputs, z comma x minus c, to obtain transcripts for each of these runs of the protocol. And now in each round, the dealer is going to share the AIZ value. So this is the transcript of one of the parties in the 2-party protocols for the ith round when that party holds input z. And it's going to share this value across all the n parties in the multi-party protocol in such a way that AIZ can be reconstructed by a set of n/2 parties, including party P0, who collectively hold z number of ones and n/2 minus z number of zeros. And on the other hand, the corresponding share for the second party, so BIX minus c, this is a share corresponding to AIZ, is going to be shared in such a way that it can be reconstructed by a set of n/2 parties excluding P0, who collectively hold x minus c number of ones and n/2 minus x plus c number of zeros. So by using this special secret sharing scheme, we can actually guarantee that the collective view of the corrupted parties plus the output of the honest parties is going to correspond to exactly a single transcript of the underlying fair protocol for the functionality little f. And that is how we will argue security of the constructed protocol. So let me stop there, and thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Please feel free to write in the chat or on Zulip.
Can I ask a question in real life?
Yes.
So majority, is that a special case of your first result or no?
Right, so majority would be a special case for the first result. However, the first result would allow only n/2 corruptions, and the second result would allow slightly more, so n over 2 plus constant.
Got it. Thank you.
Is there something special about the structure of majority that allows this n over 2 plus 1 just for that function, or do you think that the same result would apply to a larger class of functions?
Yeah, so it should be slightly more general than a majority function. So for example, threshold function, I believe we could extend to that as well. However, the result does depend pretty specifically on if you represent the truth table as a matrix, you need to have certain properties of that matrix. So it's not as generic as the first result. It needs some special properties of the underlying function.
Okay.
Okay. Last call for questions, and we can maybe have the next speaker set up in the meantime. Okay. So our next speaker is Barelon, and he will tell us about the power of an honest majority in three-party computation without broadcast. Please go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the power of honest majority in three-party computation without broadcast. This is joint work with Ran Cohen, Eran Omri, and Tom Suad. So before actually talking about the three-party setting, let me give you I want to talk about the two-party setting as a motivation, specifically about the coin tossing functionality. So here we have two parties, A and B, that wish to toss a coin, meaning that at the end of the execution, both of them output the same common uniformly chosen random bit. And the goal of the parties is to do this fairly, meaning that if one of the parties is corrupted, then the other parties will still output negligibly close to a uniform random bit. However, a famous result by Cleve showed that this task is impossible to be done. So one way to try and overcome this impossibility result would be to have the parties ask another party, a server, to aid their computation, to assist them. So here, again, only A and B output a common random bit, and C doesn't learn the output, and they're only there to assist them. However, if this server is colluding with one of the parties, then Cleve's result still applies, and we cannot compute this functionality fairly. However, if the server is non-colluding and we are guaranteed to have an honest majority, then a result by Rabin and Benor showed that suddenly this is possible to compute. And in fact, the result of Rabin and Benor shows that any function can be computed in this setting, assuming an honest majority. However, the results assume the availability of a broadcast channel, meaning that whenever a party sends a message, it is guaranteed that both of the other parties receive exactly the same message. So a natural question would be to ask, what happens if we do not allow the parties to broadcast? In other words, what happens if we only assume an honest majority? Can the coin tossing functionality be computed in this setting? And until this work, this question was left unanswered. So the main question of our paper is generalizes what I just shown you, and it asks, what is the power of having only an honest majority? And to formalize this, we, as I said before, we do not allow the parties to broadcast, and in particular, we assume that they do not have any setup assumptions that imply broadcast, like PKI or proof of work assumption. And we only assume an honest majority. So which functionalities can be computed with full security in this setting? So before showing you our results, let me give you a brief explanation of what were the previous results. So if there is no broadcast, then Lamport, Shostak, and Pease show that broadcast cannot be computed. And 4 years ago, Cohen, Heitner, Omri, and Rotem, they considered symmetric functionalities, where in our work, symmetric means that all parties have the same output. And they gave a characterization of all symmetric functionalities. However, their lower bounds do not adapt to the asymmetric case, where the parties do not necessarily agree on the output. And the reason is that they use a generalization of the hexagon argument due to Fisher, Lynch, and Merritt, which requires the parties to agree on the same output. So in particular, they do not care about asymmetric functionalities, and the proof doesn't apply there. And in particular, it also doesn't apply to the server-aided case, where one of the parties does not receive an output. And finally, for asymmetric functions, we still have the results of Fitzi-Garay, Maurer, and Ostrowski, who showed two functionalities. They defined two functionalities, which they call them oblivious cast and converge cast, which both of them, each on their own, can imply broadcast. And therefore, by the previous result that I showed earlier, it means that both of these functionalities cannot be computed in this setting. So now that I showed you the known results, let me show you our results. So we considered mostly three-party functionalities. However, our results directly can be generalized directly to the multi-party setting using standard techniques. And we prove both lower bounds and upper bounds for full security. In particular, a special use case of our results is the server-aided computation that I talked about earlier, where one of the parties doesn't have an input nor an output. And what we do is we provide a characterization of all functionalities that can be computed in this setting. And what our characterizations show in this case is that we can take any three-party protocol and convert it into a two-party protocol computing exactly the same functionality. In other words, this means that the additional of adding the server doesn't actually provide any additional power when considering full security. And when combining these results with Cleave's results about the impossibility of coin tossing, this means that it is impossible to compute coin tossing in the server-aided setting, even though we have an honest majority. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Are there any questions? So I can ask a quick question. Okay.
So Bar, I missed the exact definition. What is it about server-aided computation, the way you defined it, that makes it different from just honest majority computation?
So usually, like in the protocol of Rabin and Benor, they assumed honest majority, but they also assume the availability of a broadcast channel. Here, we do not allow the parties to broadcast. They can only use secure point-to-point channels.
I see.
Other questions? Please feel free to speak up or write on chat. So I have a question about this model of server-aided computation. You said that, so I also remember reading that in the three-party setting, this is, you show that this does not help. What can we say about more parties? I'm sorry if you already said this in your talk.
Yes, so we can still use a player partitioning argument to extend the impossibility results to more parties. So for example, if we consider coin tossing, again, with only two parties receiving an output and the rest of the servers do not receive an output, then this result still applies, assuming that the adversary can corrupt at least a third of the parties.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if there are no other questions, we can move on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Jaron. Jaron Skosted Gunderson, and he'll tell us about a secret sharing based MPC protocol for Boolean circuits with good amortized complexity.
Yes, so thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I would like to present this joint work with Ignacio Cascudo. And the goal of our paper was to come up with a new version of this popular speech protocol, which is a secret sharing-based MPC protocol. But we want to come up with a version that works over small fields. So first of all, I'll give a small introduction to how this speech protocol works, and point out why it doesn't work for small fields. So the idea in the speech protocol is that we have a global key, which is additively shared between all the parties. The data we are computing on is also additively shared between the parties. And in order to ensure active security against this dishonest majority, we also have this MAC. And the relation is that the MAC should be the key times the data. So during the protocol, the parties have to open some values, and if the adversary will try to open to something else, the only way they can do that is to guess alpha. Otherwise, the MAC won't hold anymore. So if Q is large, then it's hard for them to guess alpha, but if Q is small, the security breaks down. So can we circumvent this problem for speeds? Can we adapt these ideas to work for small fields? And actually, Damgaard and Zacharias came with a solution to this in 2013 with a protocol known as Minimac. Their idea was to batch the field element into a vector, and for now we just assume that the field is F2, and then encode it using an error correcting code, and then use a max coordinate-wise max. So the security of these Minimac protocols then relies on the minimum distance of the code, and furthermore, since they are doing the computation and doing execution of multiplication gates, they end up in what we call the Schur square of the code. We also need a high minimum distance of this code. So the communication overhead depends on this ratio here, the length of the code divided by the dimension. And for a setup like this, the best we can get is about this ratio is about 10. So our idea was to replace this error correcting code with a notion called reverse multiplication friendly embeddings, which was introduced in this for MPC in this paper here. So we still use this batching technique, but we encode it to a field instead of to a code word. And the idea is that then we can carry out the multiplication in the field. So a reverse multiplication friendly embedding consists of a pair function phi and psi, and phi maps the vectors to the field. Then we can carry out the multiplication in the field and use psi to map it back. And what we get should then be exactly the coordinate-wise products of x and y. So this leads us to how our online phase of our protocol works. So you could say it's in some way in between Minimac and speech, because we apply more or less the speech structure, but we still have this shared global key in the field to get the security there. On the other hand, we keep our data in the vector space. So the MAC now should satisfy this relation. So if you sum up the MAC shares, it should be the alpha times phi of x, where phi is from this reverse multiplication friendly embedding. Due to this F2 linearity of phi, we can still, as in Minimac and speech, compute the sums locally. And for the products, we will use Beaver's technique, as they also do in speech and Minimac. Furthermore, we also need some additional preprocessed values because during the execution of a multiplication gate, we end up in the field and we have to convert it back to the vector space. So that's slightly more complicated than in speech, but it's comparable to what happens in Minimac, where they end up in this Schur square and have to convert it back to the original code. So in the paper, we compare our protocol to the Minimac, and we show that the comparison roughly boils down to compare these expansion factors. So in the Minimac, it's the length of the code divided by the dimension, and our it's the field size divided by the vector space size. And in this paper, they show that we could get a ratio about 3.3, while, as I mentioned before, the ratio in the Minimac is about 10. So this is, of course, not the whole story. So actually, the exact communication, ours is about twice as fast as Minimac, a bit more than twice as fast as Minimac. So just to sum up, what we have done was to present a secret sharing-based MPC protocol for computation of Boolean circuits. So our approach applies this reverse multiplication-friendly embedding strategy to the dishonest majority setting by applying it to the speech protocol. The structure is very similar to the Minimax protocol, but since we do this max over the extension field, we could get some shorter encodings. And at last, I'll also just mention that in the paper, we also present how to produce all these preprocessed data we needed for the online phase. So yeah, that's it, and thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
So, Jeroen, can you say, you talked about Boolean circuits and working over Z2. Can you say something about working over small fields that aren't Boolean?
Yeah, we could do that as well. So we just presented it for the Boolean circuits, but all the arguments holds for other fields as well. So we could just use it for other smaller fields. And we also have reverse multiplication friendly embeddings there.
And then the M over K ratio just changes a bit. It's not 3.
Yeah, it will probably change a bit, but I don't think it's matters that much.
Okay.
But yeah, it will probably change a bit.
Okay. Any other questions? So if not, we can move on to a general Q&A phase. So if anyone has questions to any of the speakers of the session, please post them on the chat or just barge in and start talking, or post them on Zulip. So any questions are welcome now.
Yeah, questions or musings or discussions.
Yeah. Okay, as we said earlier, like last call for questions before the speakers all go to sleep. Takshita, what do you say? We gave them every chance possible to ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's maybe we could wait another minute or two to see if someone has burning questions that they remember to ask. And So I have a question for Tianren, if he's still here. And,
Oh yeah, yeah.
okay. So again, I'm sorry if you've already covered this in the longer version of your talk, but what is the fundamental difference between the so you have some results in the OLE correlation model that tolerate arbitrary corruptions. Is this somehow fundamentally different from what can be achieved in the OT correlation model, or is that for feasibility purposes the same?
I guess here the main difference whether you want to do arithmetic circuits. The techniques they use OT. Okay, they have one in 2-round OT. That one doesn't directly. We tried. We didn't expand it to arithmetic version. And okay, so the right corresponding is 2-round OLE instead of OLE correlation. OLE correlation is stronger than 2-round OLE. But somehow we also didn't manage to do that. So we do use a stronger assumption, use OLE correlation. The main difference is whether you can do arithmetic.
Okay, thank you. So so maybe the last minute, we wait for some questions for a minute or so, and if not, we could give you back 15 minutes. I almost feel like asking Evgeny if he has questions, but I don't know if he's here.
If he was there, he would have one.
Okay, so okay, so let's end this session then. Please speak up. Last chance to speak up if you have questions. Okay,